All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. My name is David Gottfried. I'm the Deputy Director for the National Nanotechnology Coordinated Infrastructure. I don't know why I mess that up every time. And welcome to another meeting of the NNCI webinar series. Before I turn it over to my colleague, Mikkel Thomas, to introduce our speaker, just a word about our next webinar, which will be 2 weeks from today on May 3rd, when we will have a panel discussing the Activate Fellowship Program for new entrepreneurs. And that will be led by our Associate Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Matt Hull. So just another word, if you missed previous webinars, all of those have been recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. You can find that by just searching YouTube NNCI, or you can find it on the NNCI events page. There are links to all of the previous webinars. And just a reminder, if you have questions, enter them into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll tackle those at the end of the webinar. And with that, I will turn it over to Mikkel to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, David. So my name is Mikkel Thomas. I am the Associate Director for Education and Outreach for the NNCI Coordinating Office, and it's my pleasure to introduce Quinn Spadola. She is the Deputy Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office in DC. I won't say much about that because I think she's going to talk a lot about that in her presentation. Prior to that, she was the Associate Director for Education and Outreach for the NNCI Coordinating Office, which was my position. So I am following in her big shoes. We are very happy to be able to get Quinn to come back and give a lecture during this webinar series, except now she's on the other side. So I will turn that over to Quinn now.
Thank you, Mikkel. It's glad to be back. I'm glad to be back. Oh, we're all doing well with our English today. I'm happy to talk to all of you today. I was looking at the participant list and I recognized many of the names. So many of you know me. I feel like I need to start today by acknowledging the loss that we all suffered recently with the passing of Oliver Brand last week. For those of us who were lucky enough to work with him, we know that he was an extraordinarily kind human being. And for the hole that he has left in the NNCI and in the NNI is nothing compared to, I think, the hole he's basically left for humanity, because to meet someone as humble and as smart, hardworking, and kind, genuinely, I remember many a meeting when he always stood up for his people and had no problems raising his hand if there was a mistake and taking the, saying that was my fault, which I think is a sign of a good leader, and guiding the NNCI and a real pillar for the NNI. So I just wanted to acknowledge the loss that we are all feeling with his passing, because it is so new and so raw. So I wanted to start with that. And I think we should all count ourselves lucky to have been able to been his colleagues for as long as we were. So with that, as I said, most of you know me. I know most of you online. I used to be Mikkel, and I'm a very able person in that position now, and I've moved on to the NNCO, which I'm going to talk about today. I know that as part of this webinar series, having been invited by the E&O Associate Director, you would think I'd be talking about education and outreach. But based on my time with all of you, as well as what I've just learned from being in the community, I actually realize it's still good to point out what the NNI and the NNCO are, that you are all part of the NNI community, and how the NNCO can support your efforts. Because I think there's still sometimes this misconception that we are part of the NSF in some way. As part of the NNCI, you were supported by the NSF, but the NNCO is completely separate from the NSF. The NSF is one of many agencies that are a part of the NNI. So I just wanted to kind of go through that to help everybody understand the role that the NNCO can play for you and for nanotechnology. So starting with a little history lesson. And for those of you who have your NNCI image calendar, we have the actual dates for these events marked on your calendars as part of nanotechnology history. So the NNI covers everything that the federal government supports in nanotechnology research and development. And the NNI was launched in 2000 by President Clinton at a very famous talk, at least famous among nano people. And then we were codified into law in the 21st Century Nanotechnology R&D Act by President Bush in 2003. And this is important because unlike when a president announces an initiative without a law cementing our place, so to speak, we can kind of be an administrative priority and then kind of flit away. But having this 21st Century Nanotechnology R&D Act, and then that was also reauthorized, not only does it mandate what the NNI needs to accomplish, but creates the NNCO in order to support the goals of the NNI. And we've always said that the NNI enjoys bipartisan support with the announcement by Clinton, the signing into law by Bush, and continuing through till today, and still very active. There we go. And so where do we sit if we're not a part of any agency? As I said, we are not a part of the NSF. So where are we? And you can see in my slide, the NNCO supports the subcommittee on nanoscale science, engineering, and technology. If you follow those lines up, that subcommittee falls under the Committee on Technology, which falls under the National Science and Technology Council. NSTC, which is unfortunate. I imagine many of people in the audience have been thinking about a very different NSTC, where the S stands for semiconductors. It's not a great acronym for people in the government. And that, of course, falls underneath the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And so the director of the NNCO, many of you have met him, Brandon Brough. He has a title in OSTP. He is like the assistant director for nanotechnology, or it might be associate director for nanotechnology. And we are both on detail from OSTP to serve as leadership in the NNCO. So I know this is a bit of a messy slide, but just to help further reinforce this idea that we're not a part of a single agency, that we actually serve all of the NNI member agencies. And we receive feedback and quadrennial reviews by two different bodies, by the PCAS, the President's Council on Advisors for on Science and Technology, as well as through the national academies. And people have within this community have sat on the academies panels in the past for the review of the NNI and the NNCO. Getting to all of our agencies, and many of you have seen this slide before, I believe, but just to highlight it again, these are all of the different agencies that are part of the NNI and work to fulfill the vision of the NNI, which is a future in which the ability to understand and control matter at the nanoscale leads to ongoing revolutions in technology and industry that benefit society. And so, because you receive funding from the NSF, which is one of those icons on my slide there, you are a part of the NNI community. If you receive funding from NASA to do nanotechnology research, you are a part of the NNI community. If you're a high school teacher who did an RET that was supported through the NSF to do nanotechnology research, you are a part of the NNI community. If you were an REU who did an REU project on nanotechnology that was supported by one of these agencies, you are a part of the NNI community. And so from the federal perspective, these are all the agencies that participate in NSET and help guide the goals and priorities of the NNI. And then the NNCO is what sort of makes those priorities and goals happen. I think many people from the NNCI have interacted with my office, the NNCO, through education and outreach efforts. I know When I first joined down at Georgia Tech, many people mostly knew about the NNCO through the work that Nancy Healy had done with us, through working and connecting with teachers, and then other people through being guests. You might recognize some people on my slide by being guests on our the podcast series that the office presents. But we do a lot more than outreach and education, and so that's what I wanted to talk a little bit more today. And that's to help inform you on how we can support your effort. And also, there might be resources that you will find very, very valuable. And so we engage with the nanotechnology community, both nationally and internationally. There are communities of research around environmental health and safety are our most active ones, where colleagues in the United States work with colleagues in the EU on primarily issues of environmental health and safety and regulatory concerns, standards concerns. So we do interact with international colleagues around nanotechnology. The EU, US communities of research is one of the more formal ones, but we of course meet with and chat with people from other countries as well, and look for opportunities to work together on specific topics. We collaborate activities between and among the various federal agencies that are a part of the NNI. As you know, we promote education and training. We promote commercialization and help to support nano entrepreneurs. And of course, trying to connect our office with Matt Hull, who's amazing as your Innovation and Entrepreneurship Associate Director, to learn what more the NNCO can do to support that community. We are responsible for publishing a number of reports and documents, such as the supplement to the president's budget, the NNI supplement to the president's budget each year as well. And another document that we are responsible for creating is the strategic plan for the NNI, which must be developed every 5 years. And the most recent one was released to the public in October 2021. And the agencies that are a part of that NSET, they're the ones who develop our strategic plan. And it is through the feedback from our various agency members and meeting the missions and mandates of their own home agencies in order to create the goals that the NNCO and the NNI work, to create the goals of the NNI that the NNCO works to help achieve. And I wanted to point this out because it shows all of the different areas that we are active in. Of course, we work to ensure that the United States remains a world leader in nanotechnology research and development. So all of you who are working in research and development, we are helping to support that, our member agencies. To promote commercialization, I already talked about that. And, you know, we've had our webinars and our industry liaison, Mike Kiley, who loves nothing better than to coach young companies and also meet with more mature companies and discuss the needs that the nanotechnology commercialization community has. We provide infrastructure to sustainably support nanotechnology research and development and deployment. And that is firmly where the NNCI sits. You are part of that physical infrastructure, and you are one of the shining examples of that infrastructure. Of course, the DOE has their NSRCs, NIST has their center, NIH, USDA, they all support infrastructure in nanotechnology as well. And engage the public and expand the nanotechnology workforce. And this goal is very important to me personally, as many of you know, but also because prior to the 2021 strategic plan, the NNI operated under only 4 goals. And these were the same 4 goals that were listed in that 21st Century Nanotechnology R&D Act back in 2003. And the goal number 4, engage the public and expand the nanotechnology workforce, was not one of the original goals of the NNI. Now, we had work and effort in it because goal number 3, infrastructure, was interpreted to include physical, cyber, and human infrastructure. But recognizing how important workforce development is, the NSET pulled out goal number 4 in this latest strategic plan and really doubling down on and acknowledging the importance of workforce development in nanotechnology. And then lastly, ensuring the responsible development of nanotechnology, which is our efforts in environmental health and safety, as well as ethical, legal, and societal implications of nanotechnology. And in the most recent strategic plan, including responsible conduct in research, as well as inclusion, diversity, equity, and access as another major pillar of the NNI, and ensuring that those ideals are present in everything that we do. And I wanted to kind of, to bring together a plan like this requires so much coordination and effort, bringing together all of the different agencies. They had public meetings that many of you attended actually in order to collect information. There is a request for information as well that I hope that many of you also responded to. And another addition to this strategic plan was the National Nanotechnology Challenges mechanism. And the addition of this challenge mechanism was in recognition of the need of the NNI to be more nimble in its ability and have the ability to respond to administration priorities. I think the NNCO and the NNI enjoy a really wonderful space in which we are a part of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, but we are also outside of it. The director sits in OSTP and the deputy director, but the activities that we do are really driven by NSET, driven by the goals of the NNI. And so we are not political in the sense of a political appointee that, becomes a pumpkin at the end of a president's term. Rather, we continue beyond administrations, but we are still a part of the federal government, and we should be responding to the priorities of the administration. And so this challenge mechanism was created in order to allow us to do that. And in order to determine what kind of challenges the NNI would build or support, it took a lot of thought and effort. The creation of the climate change challenge as our first National Nanotechnology Challenge really came about thanks to comments from the request for information during the development of the strategic plan. There were questions about what kind of challenges would be something the NNI should have, and climate change was one of the suggestions. Also, the topic needs to be something that is relevant to a significant number of NNI member agencies. We can't develop a challenge that only one or two agencies actually have any kind of mission space in. We need to find a topic that can engage multiple stakeholders at the federal level. And as I said, it's got to be something that aligns with administration priorities as well, and also have a sense of urgency to it, which I think addressing climate change certainly does. And so after thinking about all of those requirements, the way that the Nano for Earth was developed is it started out as something that was fed only, a group of people coming together to sort of think about the scope, the topic and the scope of a national nanotechnology. But once that was done, really, we needed to engage the entire NNI community. So the challenge Nano for Earth was announced publicly this past October for National Nanotechnology Day, which everybody online should know what day that is. And that's because the intention is not to drive what the community does, but rather to have the community drive our challenges, to hear from them on what kind of impacts we should have, how we should further refine the scope of the challenge at hand, and to also make sure that it is something that motivates people, all of the stakeholders of the NNI. So many of you attended our first workshop. Thank you very much. And then from there, we're going to continue on. There will be a couple of papers, which not the most exciting thing, but still important to the community, as well as a series of 4 roundtables, discussion workshops, where we're going to be bringing in experts around the 4 themes that were identified as important from the conversations we had during that workshop. And just again, another way to show what the NNCO does beyond education and outreach, and where you, of course, as members of the NNI community, really play a role in if you responded to that RFI, helping to shape that challenge, and there will be challenges in the future as well. So if you have thoughts on that, they are always, we're always welcoming that, as well as participating once a challenge becomes public in the activities that follow. Then I wanted to spend a little time on the responsible development of nanotechnology, the nano-EHS community. And nano environmental health and safety and the ethical, legal, and societal implications of nanotechnology that has been around from the beginning. And I think that the picture on my slide really highlights how all the other goals of the NNI cannot move forward and cannot be achieved without remembering the responsible development of nanotechnology, that we need to keep in mind the consequences and the implications of the work that we are doing, the health and safety of the environment, as well as the workers in user facilities, the information that you need in order to keep your workers safe as well, and how valuable that is. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the strategic plan, this last one, brought in responsible conduct of research and IDEA. And I believe that much of what the NNCO had been doing and much of what the NNI community at large had been doing for a while was addressing IDEA. And I'm not saying that we had to add it because nothing was being done in it, but I think it acknowledges that there's always more that can be done in that area. And we should always be thinking about those issues while moving forward with what we do. And particularly as an example of infrastructure, you play a real key role in the inclusion, diversity, equity, and access of nanotechnology. And I'll get to that a little bit more in another slide. As I mentioned, we do connect with international colleagues, primarily the EU through the communities of research, through various characterization, toxicity, human toxicity risk assessment groups. I believe there are some members of the NNCI who are active in those. As well, I wanted to point out that we have some ongoing activities right now in refreshing our nano-EHS research strategy. The research strategy, the most recent one, was published in 2011, so it's a little bit old. And there have been some updates since, and a colleague of mine in this office, I think, said it really well when she pointed out that 2011 outlined the questions that need to be addressed in nano-EHS. And then there was an update in 2014 and an update in 2017. And those two documents really outline what the federal government has been doing to allow the answering of those questions, the types of programs that they have created and are funding, the centers that they have created and are supporting in order to get to those answers. And our hope is, with this refresh that we're working on right now, is we'll be able to finally share some of the answers. Now, any of you who have ever done any work in environmental health and safety, you understand how nuanced that is. And as in scientists in general, we are, can never say anything with 100% certainty ever. Any of you who do much in science communication are aware of that as well. But we are going to be able to say, with a lot of backed up referencing and references, we'll be able to make some statements about where we stand in a number of the questions that were asked in the 2011 statement. As part of that, there is currently an RFI, a request for information, out because we want your feedback, as well as there's going to be a public workshop on May 31, June 1. And a draft of the strategy is going to be released next National Nanotechnology Day is the goal for public comment. So there are a number of areas, again, where we're looking for your input and your comments about activities around the NNI. And here's more: the refreshing the NNI's EHS research strategy. The public meeting will be May 1 and June 1st. Registration is going to be opening very, very, very soon. And when we send out information on that, we've also got links to the RFI, which is currently public. And you can certainly find it if you go to nano.gov. There's a slide about it as well. I know that some of you may be traveling to DC over this time period to participate in Jamie's Science Outside the Lab. If you want to, come to our Refreshing the NNI's EHS research strategy instead, I won't tell him since you're already going to be in DC, and so that you can share your thoughts on that. Of course, the RFI is another opportunity for that as well. And I also want to say for this group, for any group, we want to be really intentional and open in who attends this public meeting as well as who responds to the RFI. We're really thinking about all of the groups that we want to make sure to connect with: the academics, the industry, the NGOs, community organizers, people working in social justice. Really, this is a strategy that'll look at the environmental health and safety of nanomaterials. And we all are stakeholders when it comes to environment, the health and safety. And so if you have any thoughts for people that you think we should make sure are at the meeting or responding to that RFI, do not hesitate to tell me. I welcome that. We want everybody we can think of knowing that this activity is happening. And now back to what I said before about how the NNCI really is one of the strengths of the NNI in meeting and addressing some of the ideals around inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And what I have on my slide here is a quote from Dr. Prabhakar, who is the director of OSTP and the current science advisor to the president. And this quote is pulled from the cover letter that is a part of the 2023 NNI supplement to the president's budget. And so if you look at our budget supplement, there's a letter that she has signed. And within that, she talks about the different programs within the NNI that connect with various priorities of the administration. And of course, issues of inclusion and diversity and equity and access are a part of the administration's priorities. But what is said about how the NNI helps to address these needs and this idea directly relates to the NNCI. And what is written is the nanoscale R&D infrastructure enables broad access to the resources necessary to develop nanoscale solutions, providing the opportunity for diverse community involvement and the democratization of science. And this was something, the first time someone really put it to me this way, that user facilities can serve that purpose, is the current director of the NNCO, Brandon Bruff, who comes from a DOE user facility at Berkeley. And I think that, I don't know about all of you, but I think that envisioning your role, not just as supporting and allowing the United States to lead in nanotechnology R&D, and not just in your role as helping to commercialize nanotechnology and create applications that can help society, and not even just in your role to help with the responsible development of nanotechnology, but also as a role to help provide access. And because access, I mean, I know people are probably still thinking that the user fees are too high, but to do research at the nanoscale so often requires very expensive tools and instruments and requires a lot of investment. And so the existence of these user facilities really does help to address that. And I think including within your thought every day when you go to work, how you help to meet that those goals. I would take comfort in knowing that, in addition to everything else that infrastructure does for the NNI. All right, as I said, I was invited by Mikkel, so you would think I would talk a little bit about education and workforce development of the NNI. So many of you already know about so many of these things. We have our Nano Educators Quarterly Forum. Next week, Jacob Jones from RTNN He will actually be speaking to educators connecting nanotechnology solutions to climate change, really empowering the teachers to empower their students to think about how they can use nanotechnology to address climate change. And I'm very excited about that. That's a week from today in the evening. We do it later on to accommodate people on the West Coast as well, teachers after their teaching day is done. So very excited about that. I think it's going to be a great talk, and it's a lot of people are interested. Our registration numbers for that are very high. He's going to have a larger audience than I have today. Let's just say that by a lot. As you know, and I mean, some of these other pictures in here are from many of the NNCI sites, but we also have MinTech out of NSF as well, and the Next Tech, which I know many of you heard Lisa talk about many a time too. And so one thing about all of these is so many of them highlight programs that are funded by the NSF. And now that I'm back at the NNCO, I realize I have to get a lot better at learning about and also talking about the programs and workforce development beyond the NSF. NSF is mandated to do education outreach in this way, so it's the easy one, but the Department of Energy has teacher training programs and grants in that. Department of Defense has SCALE as one example of training, the workforce training students in that way as well. I think a big elephant in this room, maybe, that I'm sure all of you have been thinking about is with the Chips and Science Act. The Department of Commerce is about to have an awful lot of programs, I think, in nano and electronics workforce development as well, with a lot of the calls that they are putting out, or NOFOs as they call them. I'm going to bet that many of you on this webinar today have suddenly become experts in microelectronics workforce. You've probably been pulled into a number of white papers as well as a number of proposals. And I think that makes total sense because, first of all, there is a need. There's a lot of information out there showing that there is a need for increased workforce in these areas in order to help support semiconductors and microelectronics. We should just call it nanoelectronics. But I think the other reason why it makes sense is because what exists now, the workforce that we have, so much of that workforce was trained through efforts of the NNI, at the technician level with NAC and CNEU from Penn State, as well as MinTech that there is now. And so many of the NNCI sites work with MinTech now and work at your own local sites to connect with your own local community and technical colleges as well. The students that are trained in the NNCI's clean rooms and user facilities providing workforce in this area. So what there exists because of the work of people like you, and the workforce development efforts of the NNI. And I mean, here opportunities, of course, and the reasons why there is so much money being directed towards workforce development efforts, of course. And many of you on this webinar understand, of course, how we want to create opportunity and equity for all Americans in STEM. And we also want to make sure that there is a real diversity in both geography and institution for the people who are benefiting from all of this CHIPS Act funding as well. And so, as I said, your efforts really lay that foundation of what we have already. And, you know, I'm sure many of you recognize this picture. This is an older REU from Cornell, and how the existing infrastructure, the NNCI, for example, is really critical in that education workforce development. And I mentioned already how so many NNCI sites are working to connect with their community and technical colleges, as well as so many sites that have created those regional user facility networks, connecting the smaller labs and sharing, or smaller clean rooms and smaller user and characterization facilities, and sharing best practices and resources and helping them. I mean, so much of what is coming out is really almost copying what the NNCI and the NNIN and what's already been out there, this idea of networks of creating nodes and hubs and reaching out across diverse educational institutions and geographic regions. So I think, as I said, you really are part of the foundation that already exists, and moving forward, we'll have, I think, a lot to teach in supporting a microelectronics workforce. And now I'm going to get to the part of my talk of ways you can interact with the NNCO. And I think I've already touched on some of this. Respond to our RFIs, come to our public meetings. You know, just tell Jamie you're not feeling well and you play hooky and come to LaFont Plaza instead of out to wherever he's taking you for science outside the lab. But in addition to that, let us know about what you are doing. And I know that's hard because I was really bad at it actually for the 4 years when I was in your position. And coming back to the NNCO, I'm reminded again and again how important it is that you actually do that. Let us know when you have events and activities and announcements so that we can share that. My speaking at this webinar actually made it onto the list of activities happening by OSTP staff this week. Because as I said, I'm on detail from there, and I got a email from someone there who was interested to learn more about both you and the NNCO because of that. So I was able to share that information, and now I'm having some meetings to teach them about how important all of you are to the NNI. And we can amplify whatever you post on your social media. Let us know and we will repost, and we'll put on our homepage. And we will share through the listservs that we have as well. And I know for a fact that the NNCO's YouTube channel, NanoTube, has more videos on it than the NNCI's coordinating office's YouTube channel has. So please share with us when you post things on your different individual sites' YouTube channels. It costs nothing to repost a video somewhere else on YouTube. And then you might get some new and different eyes on what you have created, which is always useful, can always possibly lead to some good conversations. And then tell us your stories. Tell us your successes. Our communications person, Patrice, he will work with you to try to develop stories that we can then promote. Both your successes in workforce, you know, telling a story about a teacher who was trained in an NNI program at UCLA, for example, and then maybe moved on to have an RET and then moved on to work at Stanford, for example, and maybe she interacted with a student who went on to study something related to nanotechnology, who now is themselves working in the field. Something that, you know, for example, comes full circle like that. That's the kind of story that we want to help to amplify, as well as any commercialization stories, as well as we look at the impact of the NNI. And then go to nano.gov. There's lots of great resources out there where you learn more about the EHS strategy, about our budget supplements and our documents as well. And also about upcoming webinars. One that we're excited about is our first public webinar about micro and nanoplastics. And it's going to feature people from a number of different agencies, really talking about what the United States is doing to help to address that major problem. So there's going to be a two-part webinar because there are so many different agencies doing so many different things in that area. So there will be more information about when that happens and an opportunity to register and to learn more about you know, addressing micro and nanoplastics. So that's another example of something, letting you know about the webinars so you can stay up on the type of activities that are happening across the federal government in nanotechnology. And then, because really I'm among friends here, instead of just giving you that info at nnco.nano.gov, these are the actual human beings that are working on all of these different activities in our office. And so these are the people that you can talk to, whether you want to share stories and communication and events. Email Patrice for that. Or if you're interested in learning more about our nano EHS efforts and our refresh, that's REMA. For those of you who have been working on Nano for Earth or interested in following that, that is Maria Fernanda. And she also, she's very busy, also helps with work with undergraduate students and K-12 teachers. So she's got both of those in her portfolio. And I didn't even mention the Student Leaders Conference, which we help to organize each year. So if you have undergraduates who are interested in nanotechnology and entrepreneurship, or just getting a broader view of what's happening in nanotechnology and emerging technologies, the Student Leaders Conference is another great opportunity. And then our commercialization and entrepreneurship guide, Mike Kiley, our industry liaison, he's happy to talk to anyone about what he knows, and he knows a lot. He's been in this position for a very long time. He's always fascinating to hear from about what's going on in the area and what kind of resources are out there, and happy to talk to any budding entrepreneurs as well as any companies that you might have going on coming out of your universities or your facilities. And then, of course, again, go to our webinars, go to our workshops, respond to our RFIs, share news and highlights, and participate in any of our communities of research, our cores or our networks, the students, the teachers, go to the micro and nanoplastics webinar as well. So many more ways to interact with the NNCO than just through education and outreach, more than just going to the NSTA or sharing your information through that. And we provide the NNCO, working across the government and nanotechnology and all of those different goals. So many different areas and opportunities to interact. And sincerely, you are the community that we serve. So we definitely want to hear from you through all of those different mechanisms, and then our various handles. And then lastly, thank you. And any questions?
Thank you, Quinn. Mikkel, you were going to handle the questions, correct?
Correct.
And if anybody has questions, we have a couple in the queue already, but if you have questions, just type them into the Q&A.
So we'll start with our first one. And this is going back to your NNI strategic plan goals. So if you want to pull that slide back up. So we'll start with, regarding goal 4, stakeholders are quite diverse: scientists, engineers, users. So context is critically important to enabling a shared vision of understanding. What specific means are being used to grow goal number 4?
All right, let me read that. That was a lot of words. Stakeholders quite diverse. Absolutely. Okay, so I think that when you think about, oh wait, we were going to the goals, not the responsible conduct. When you think about these goals that I showed you, the NNCO works to help agencies fulfill those goals. And so the programs that support growing the nanotechnology workforce that you would interact with at a university level or at a community college level, for example, they would be funded through our agencies. So the work that for example, the NSF is doing, supporting REU, supporting MinTech, supporting paid internships, really helping to support users getting into the clean room facilities that you have. So that's one way. And then the NNCO itself, as the public face of the NNI, we have things like our webinars that I've talked a lot about, and our podcasts, and working with teachers and working with undergraduates. So those are all different ways that we are working to help grow goal 4. And I think by thinking about the various audiences, reaching the K-12 teachers so they can reach their students to grow awareness around nanotechnology and the jobs that are available around nanotechnology, by reaching out to the community and technical college faculty for the same thing, so that they are aware of those opportunities and themselves personally, and also to share with their students. The primarily undergraduate institutions, trying to connect with them as well, and then up to the R1. And then a lot of the work that I think Mike has done in commercialization is really what you would think of as trying to help grow that workforce in terms of the knowledge that entrepreneurs and companies need to commercialize their products, and frankly, the responsible development of nanotechnology, understanding the regulatory landscape, both within the United States and internationally, is really key to help being able to grow the workforce. I hope that helped, Randy.
So continuing, without ethical guidelines for nanotech, can you elaborate on goal 5? What is responsible?
I think that there are. We do, if you, the 2011 strategy ties the ethical, legal, and societal implication of nanotechnology throughout the entire document, and does look towards ways that our various agencies with their different missions can work to have a responsible development. And of course, that depends on if we're dealing with a regulatory agency, or if we're dealing with an agency that is to protect consumers, like Consumer Product Safety Commission, or that's, I guess, an independent office. If we're dealing with NIOSH or OSHA and concerned with both worker safety, or EPA and the environment. So I don't know why you think there are not ethical guidelines. I think that the agencies themselves have their own guidelines that they follow. And then within the development of that strategy, there was always trying to keep that in mind. And actually with the refresh that's happening, the public meeting that's happening at the end of May, the keynote on the very first day is going to be a panel of our goal is to have some science and technology and society scholars, some people working in the ethical, legal, and societal implications of emerging technologies, as well as a lawyer and someone from the federal government discussing the ethics and the implications and the legal ramifications of emerging technologies, including nanotechnology. And we've purposely made that the keynote on the very first day of our public workshop or public meeting, in order to set that tone and to make sure that as we have our other conversations, that is those concepts stay with us and we can return to them throughout the 2 days.
So David has a question.
Sure, and I get the prerogative of vocalizing it. So how does the NNCO and the NNI interact with other national initiatives? And in particular, I think about the National Quantum Initiative, where there's a lot of overlap in some of these objectives.
Certainly. Well, so the National Quantum Initiative sits at OSTP now. They do not have a coordinating office, and they're actually working on the reauthorization of their law right now. So we, I think, interact with them on an administrative side, just helping them to understand what a coordinating office is, what kind of mandates and goals a coordinating office can help to meet. I think there's actually another coordinating office called the NITRD, which is the coordinating office that works in IT, just like the NNCO, only around IT instead of nanotechnology. And they actually support the quantum office quite a bit in a lot of their administrative and just the day-to-day bureaucracy that is required for working and being a part of the federal government. So I'm sure that's an unsatisfactory answer, because I'm thinking about just more how we support them in the very fact that they exist. As far as the content is concerned, I think that the NNCO's role is to constantly be reminding people that nanotechnology is really foundational to what is happening in quantum information and science and engineering right now, and that without something like the NNCI or the DOE to support that research, it's not really going to move forward very well. And that I've even joked that the nano EHS strategy basically applies to a lot of the work happening in quantum right now, except for maybe you have to worry about freezer burn. I know maybe that's not that funny, but I think that the NNCO has really laid, and the NNI has really laid the foundation for the very existence of the quantum initiative. And I would probably get in trouble maybe for saying that, but we are there. So from the NNCO perspective, reminding people, and by people, I mean people at OSTP, of how important that is. And then of course, from the perspective of the NNI, and which you are a part of, it comes to the community, the efforts like the NNCI with their quantum community research community, and the workshop that happened with NSF, and I hope more of, to help point out that the tools that the NSF is supporting is really going to help support quantum. So I think it's more about reminding people that we are foundational to these new emerging technologies, and nano is not done by any stretch of the imagination, but we are certainly allowing and building new areas from what has been accomplished.
So we have one more question in the queue, also a long one, so let's get with it. As a part of standards developments related to AI, we've clearly learned that developing a shared vision of understanding, i.e. communications, takes time. There appears to be a workforce development opportunity as math is the language of science and engineering, but academic programs may be exacerbating the situation and not including art. It is STEAM, not STEM. Is communication going to become a prioritized opportunity so that the CHIPS and Science Act can be fully leveraged?
Well, so you're talking to somebody who has an MFA in science and natural history filmmaking, so you do not have to sell me on the idea that it is STEAM and not STEM, even though that is what we tend to call it. And I also think that communication is key to all of that. I don't know if the first part of this is kind of tongue-in-cheek or not. I'm curious about what kind of standards development related to AI that you're talking about. I think there's been a lot of effort in standards development around nanotechnology. And you're saying that by not fully embracing the need for communication skills, science and engineering departments are making the problem worse as far as allowing a shared vision to be developed. I'm not going to fight you on that. I think that the soft skills, including communication, need to be better stressed. As far as is communication going to become a prioritized opportunity in the CHIPS and Science Act? You know, the language of the act is public. The effort around workforce development is well recognized. There's also, you know, I think responsible development is something that's highlighted in that as well. I think that as as NOFOs come out and different calls for proposals come out, interpreting what they are asked in order to highlight and support communication efforts would be a really important part of that. But I think prioritizing, being able to say whether or not communication is going to be prioritized in these opportunities, that's really a question for the funding agencies, not the NNCO.
Okay. Thank you very much, Quinn. I believe that is all the questions that we have in the Q&A now. So I will turn things back over to David.
All right. Well, thank you, Quinn. Thank you, Mikkel. Thank you to all of our attendees. And we'll wrap this up and hope to see you all in 2 weeks for the next NNCI webinar on May 3rd. Thanks very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.